Kicking off hour number 2 here on Hurrdat Sports Radio on AM 590 ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. I'm Robbie Lula. Andrew Rogers here with me. We are joined now on the Warhorse Sportsbook Hotline by Brian Christopherson, senior writer for Husker 24/7. BC, how are you this morning?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you guys?
Good, BC.
We're doing well. You been busy at all this week, or how's that been going?
It's been busy, but it's also been sort of that busy where you're on guard as much as you're actually active. It feels like so that it's a mixed bag there. But I think this is always exciting when there's something in the air and you never know quite what's going to happen, but there's hope at least.
BC, it seems like there's something in the air right now because Omar Hales just tweeted out something like a Go Big Red tweet. We saw Keith Williams do something like maybe 15 minutes ago. What do you think is brewing in the air right now?
Well, there are
a lot of things.
Yeah, there still are targets out there. I'm not saying this is what it is. There's, we've mentioned there's an O lineman out of Bishop Gorman, like Rugaroli, who could be an option still at this point. Someone to consider maybe with that, but we'll see. So it could be something like that. But at this point, that's the beauty of tweets like that. People can guess like 5 different things and suspect they're right, and it'll give them a jolt in their step as they go to work today.
BC, is it possible that we're in Kyle McCord territory here?
I don't know if it's connected to that. I don't, but I feel good as of this minute. I feel good about Nebraska's chances with Kyle McCord. Now, I always get nervous when I go on radio with stuff like that, and that I hedge a lot. You guys know that already about me, because I how this world is in college football, and this thing is so fluid these days that you might think something's happening, and you might be 90% sure or 80% sure, and then there's a misdirection on you. So I'm always prepared for that possibility. But as for McCord, if you say right now, how do you feel about Nebraska's chances? I feel really good still. I'm optimistic there that they're going to pull off the daily double as everybody's worried about.
BC, speaking of cryptic Twitter and tweeting, at what point during the flurry of eyeball emojis and fire emojis coming out from seemingly every player associated with the Nebraska football program on Monday night were you like, I think something's happening?
Yeah, it started about 2 or 3, I think, in the afternoon, where there was stuff picking up, and I was getting a text message here or there that's like something's happening. And I guess I knew that the Raiola thing was maybe brewing, but just before Steve Wiltfong of 24/7 Sports put out his crystal ball flip. And when Wiltfong does something like that, you sit up very tall in your chair. I mean, he doesn't do stuff just to do stuff. Now that doesn't mean the horse race can't change at times. It does. Sometimes it flips this way and then it goes that way. But when a person like him is putting that out there, it's telling you which direction at that moment it's headed. And so I know some people don't follow it as close. They're like, oh, some guy's just taking a stab in the dark here, at what's going to happen. No, I mean, there's some research and good sourcing behind stuff like that when it comes from certain people, and he's one of them. So once he did that, you're like all hands on deck, and we've remained that way since. And I still am, with an official visit expected this weekend. I mean, that tells you enough right there, doesn't it?
Well, how many more official visits does he actually need in order to feel like Nebraska is his home? Because whether they're unofficial visits to go see Uncle Donnie, or whether they're official visits that actually dock his time at Nebraska, it seems like this dude has been part-time living in Nebraska.
Yeah, I mean, he obviously has a strong connection. No one will forget. It was February when he made the one trip for the basketball game was going on at the same time, and he makes that walk down to the front row, and his name's getting chanted. And I just don't know if other places other places are in better spots as programs, of course, like where Georgia is right now. But there's such a want for something to change here and for the corner to be turned. That has to be impactful to some guys when they really think about it. And like, I could go try to be that person who really gets this thing in a certain direction and look at what the response might be, because he got a taste of it that weekend for sure, what the response would be. So I wonder if that's always stuck with him. But there's stuff you wonder about, like 4 days before all the noise came about a flip. He was tweeting at KJ Bolden about joining the Georgia family. So obviously there was something very late in the process that sort of twisted that it toward a possible different direction. So it'll be interesting as the story gets written more fully, and you don't know if every detail will come out, what all has transpired the last week. But it's been one of the most fascinating recruiting moments I've seen in Husker football was Monday. There's no doubt. It might be unrivaled, really, the attention it got, not just here, but across the country, and how, you're getting people from the West Coast, the East Coast, writers from every national outlet are talking about this thing. And that's something I've never seen with Nebraska recruiting. So it was a pretty amazing moment.
We're talking with Brian Christopherson from Husker 24/7. BC, part of that's because of the surprise of it all, right? Like,
yeah,
most of the big time recruits, there's some momentum building. Like, if he had committed to Nebraska back in somewhere between February and April, or whenever he ended up committing to Georgia, that wouldn't have felt like this. It would have been a huge deal, right? But it wouldn't have felt like this. Part of this is because it came out of nowhere, seemingly.
Yeah, I mean, there were layers to it. That's one of the pieces. Then you're talking about a top 5 recruit. Then you're talking about his family history with Nebraska. That's an interesting sidebar. And then it's Georgia. If it's Georgia or Alabama on the other end of any of the thing like that, people always are like, "Oh man, how'd that happen?" Because it's sort of just expected to always happen their way. So I am as interested in as anybody to find out some more details on that one, and what has happened. But it definitely seems like a real thing that's a possibility for Nebraska, and it's got recruits excited. I know about that. I've talked with a couple of them besides the eyeball emojis. Like Ja'Cory Barney. I was speaking with him, I think it was Saturday, and this was before the Raiola stuff, but he was just talking about, as a receiver, like, getting that game changer at quarterback and what that can mean, and how the whole offense is shaped around that guy, and it can change everything. And so there's a lot of guys coming in this class and young players from last class who really expect 24 to be different. And if Nebraska can, land these 2 QBs in this last week, maybe this gives the jolt that was sort of missing from not having bowl practices, because that's been sort of a bummer not having anything going on with that. And at least there's this in the air that has some people kind of rallying with excitement, and the fan base needed this too. Last week when I was on the show, Andrew was asking about that splash. You need that splash moment. And I think Andrew was more right than my answer to him was that this fan base is desperate for it. They need something to hold on to and get fired up about. It's not that they don't think Rule doesn't have a process and that it's going to work over the long haul, but for the months ahead, it's nice to go to Christmas or something like that and be like, we got this guy and we got this is where it can go. And maybe that can happen.
Especially if some of your relatives are from Iowa and you have to rub something in their face there a little bit. BC,
that seems like something that's personal to you.
No, it's fine. BC, I know there's some other things to talk about besides quarterback, but before we move on from the situation, you mentioned, at some point you think we'll find out some additional details about how and why this happened, and kind of why it happened at the stage that it did. Have you started hearing anything or started putting anything together on what happened on the Georgia side of things? It certainly seems like the NIL, maybe some promises not being followed through, were a factor, but have you started getting any details on that and trying to put that together?
I've probably heard some of the same rumblings you have, Robbie, but and I just don't know enough to say that what it is yet. I'm kind of in that I'm trying to figure it out and interested just like anybody. You never know. What I would say from Nebraska's end is I do think there's been times where people have wondered how good is the NIL setup here? How's that really working? And this could be a big statement moment. I'm not speaking as much just from Raiola, but like from any of these transfer guys, if they get them in, about what can get done from that side of the fence. People heard Rule the other day on his interview with McAfee, and how he says the collective here is in a really good spot. And this could be a big statement if you could get a couple QBs for Rule in this program, because people wonder how he's going to react to like that. Hey, you got this weak spot on your roster. What do you do as a head coach in this offseason? And the analogy I used in my writing was, I feel like Husker football has settled here sometimes, and I've fallen into this with previous staffs, where it's like that 5-foot putt where you're trying to cozy it down and just like not run it by the hole, and it's very timid and you don't get it there. And I feel like maybe they're taking the break out of it now. They're attacking up and there's some confidence, and people really, I think, need that and appreciate that. And they want to see it from the staff. They want to see that the NIL can do that sort of thing. So if this all comes together, that will be a big statement on a multiple fronts. From Georgia's end, I don't know enough to say that it was this or that. So I'll wait.
BC, some other news coming out that same night, outside of the frenzy that we've been talking about for the first 11 minutes of this interview. Bryce Benhart, Isaac Gifford announcing they're returning. How much do you think the noise of having major improvements in certain position groups like quarterback next year has impacted decisions like this from these guys? Do you think they'd be returning regardless just to play another season of ball? Or am I believing in the idea that they see where this team could go next year and just want to be a part of it?
I can't say yes or no to that, but which if it affected it or not. But I do remember a couple years ago with the 21 guys. Remember when like Doman and like 5 defensive guys came back, and they were a pretty good defense that 21 season. I know in that case, that was one where they like got together, and decisions by one guy did impact decisions by another guy. So I've always kept that in mind, that does matter. And when you see like Ty Robinson before the season even ends, like coming up to the press conference being like, yeah, I'll be back. And then Ben Scott, we hear a few days after I was in the weight room and he's planning to be back. I have to think, as a competitor, you're like, okay, the pieces are here. This, if you really believe that you were that close, and I know that's a bad word with the fan base, but inside the walls, I don't think it is. If you believe that, and then you see 2 or 3 guys going, I can't help but think that affects your mind a bit, like to kind of push you that extra step to say, well, all right, let's do this. Plus, I think it's their best opportunity, maybe with where their football careers are at. I never begrudge anybody who's spent like 4 or 5 years in college just getting to the next season in their life. I think people are too hard on guys like that sometimes. Like Garrett Nelson gave a lot to this program, and it was time for the next season in his life, he thought, and he took a chance, and so be it. But this is huge. I mean, Gifford to me is one of the top 3 players on this team. He's a guy who saves plays once or twice a game too, where he'll track down something a yard short of the first down when it looks like trouble. And then Benhart became a guy that people are believing in this year. He changed the whole narrative about him. So you got to give him a lot of credit.
BC, I wanted to talk a little transfer portal of guys that don't play the quarterback position. I know that a lot of attention has been paid to Prince Will's brother, Prince Lee.
Yeah.
I know that I believe Julian Fleming is still on campus today, the Ohio State receiver, or he was yesterday at least. Who are some of the guys that you're looking at? I know there was a weird rumor about Trevor Etienne that I don't know where that actually came from, or if there's any truth there at all. But there's at least a couple guys, one on campus, one with obviously a brother on campus here, that there's some connection to Nebraska. How are you feeling about some of those guys that Nebraska might be able to land outside the quarterback spot?
We've felt at our site since last week that Fleming was a real possibility, and we know that this is like not a news flash that they need a receiver, but we know besides just Fleming coming in that they've wanted to add one if they can in this class, because I was talking with a couple of recruits and they've been transparent the coaches have with them that, like, yeah, we'd like to add one more veteran receiver. Fleming would certainly fit that bill in a big way. You know, he had Penn State interested in him too, and took a visit there. And you know, he's from that area, I believe. But I think Nebraska's got a real shot, because I do think they can be competitive with the NIL stuff, and I think there is stuff to. I don't think coaches like using the word sell, but there is stuff to sell despite the offense being so bad. And sometimes that's like, we couldn't be what we wanted to be because we didn't have you here. You know, like, you can say that to guys, and that really appeals to a competitor. And if you can get guys like McCord or a Fleming to see, like, hey, we got this guy Malachi Coleman over here, this guy Jalen Lloyd, and they're young players, and we're really excited about them. But they need that mentor. They need that guy to show them one more season, like, this is how it's supposed to look, and watch them grow with you. It can be really good. I could think that could be really appealing. So, getting away from some of the other guys you asked, but Fleming really interests me. Princely, obviously, because of the name, and, you know, his brother's tweeting at him and back and forth right after it happens. I mean, you can't pass on him, I don't think, if he wants to come play with his brother, he's interested. And I do know Rule has this very strong connection with that family that stretches back to when I think he's recruited at least two of the brothers, you know, in that family, or tried to recruit them. So I give Nebraska a shot there, but I don't know where that stands at this hour. I know he visited down at an SEC school a couple days ago, and so there's going to be competitors because he's a really good player and he's going to command a lot of attention. They also have a defensive back, Bly Hill, who played at St. Francis in the FCS, and he's supposed to come in the 15th through the 16th. Kind of an out of the nowhere one, but obviously when you see a guy like that who is supposed to visit, who you didn't even know about, they've done their research and they see something in him, and he's a long, rangy guy that could be a DB ad, or at least someone they're looking at. So it looks like DB is a spot where maybe they would add one of those 4 or 5 portal guys.
BC, going back to this coaching staff for a moment, because it was a top priority to get Tony White's contract restructured and out of the way. But then Donovan Raiola gets a $500K annually in terms of his contract now. Now, in the offensive line took major strides from last year, from the last year to this year, and added that huge recruiting win with Grant Brix just over a week ago. Take Dylan out of the equation. Is that enough? Is the strides you saw from the offensive line in the recruitment of Grant Brix, is that enough to get you to say he's deserving of this pay bump? Or would you like to see more improvement at the O-line position and the development of guys like Sledge and Goldman and Gatula before making that claim?
Yeah, it's a good question, Andrew. I want to be clear on something that I think some people don't know. I'm not saying you don't, but Bruns wrote this story on Sunday. We actually had one of our, it got picked up, and so I think it got misconstrued a bit, the timing on it. Like, we requested his contract last week just because we always look at contracts at this time of year.
Sure.
And the reason we requested it was because he had previously been on a deal, because he was the one guy retained, where his contract was supposed to end at 23. So we're like, okay, what happened there? Did they bump him to, so was he on the same timetable as the other guys? So we wanted to make sure that he had a deal through 24 at least, which he does now. And what we learned was, we don't know exactly when that contract was signed. He got the pay bump, but what I'm saying is it was redacted to the dates, but that could have been done in the middle of the season. It could have been done just before the season started. That's an important detail, because it tells you, he got that bump. I think it wasn't like it just happened and this Dylan Raiola stuff has happened. Some people are connecting the two, and I don't think they should. But to your question, I think one of the biggest things I noticed this season, which might apply to why that happened, is he was it felt like right in the thick of it with Satterfield, as far as when they're talking about run game stuff. And when you listen to Marcus at press conferences, he would always speak about talking to Donnie about what he's seeing in the run game and this and that. Of course, he would do that with his O-line coach, but it sounded to me like it was almost an extra step. Like they really feel like this guy is great on game day at like helping them out and process things about what's going on the field and the blocking stuff they need to use. And so when you kind of think about some of the stuff you heard in the season and the way Rule and Satterfield value him, it doesn't really surprise me. And I did think they got a bit better as the season went on. I think they still got to get better, though. So, I mean, they took a step, and now let's see them take 2 steps next year. That's the big key.
BC, a couple minutes left here. You kind of mentioned the fingers that Donnie had in the run game pie as part of the offense. There's been a lot of rumors swirling around about a potential quarterback coach coming in, maybe having a pass game coordinator title attached to that as well. How likely do you think it is at this point that we see Marcus Satterfield moved from QB coach, offensive coordinator to tight end offensive coordinator, and somebody's brought in as the quarterback's coach and maybe either a co-OC or a pass game coordinator?
Yeah, I think it's still possible that for sure that you could move some chairs around. Don't know that for certain, but I think it's a move that could be done in part because Josh Martin technically was an interim this last year, and I know he's been out recruiting, and I know guys have stuck to their roles for now. It's a long football season, though. There's other guys who you could maybe bring in if you wanted to at the QB coach spot who are maybe like in the league now, or they're still coaching. It's possible. So I think people should be patient to have a full answer on that. But my short answer, because I usually give 2 long answers, my short one is that I really think that still can happen. I do.
That's Brian Christopherson from Husker 24/7. BC, we love your long answers. That's why
we're good with those.
That's why we have you on the big spot here.
I filibuster. But yeah, I always appreciate coming on, and I do think the last thing is definitely possible, though. It's a good question, and I think it's one of the main things to still monitor as we go through December and early January.
I'm not going to make you say it. I'm just going to clear my throat here. Glenn Thomas. Glenn Thomas. BC, enjoy the rest of your day. Hopefully we have some news here and not just cryptic tweets from Nebraska staffers, and let's get this thing rolling.
Yeah, that'd be nice to put a period on the end of the sentence for sure. Thanks for having me, guys.
Thank you, BC. Always great stuff.
That's Brian Christopherson from Husker 24/7. Great, as always, from BC. He comes to us on the Warhorse Sportsbook hotline. Don't forget, Warhorse Sportsbook, best place in Nebraska to place your sports bets. Andrew knows it better than most. You can go to Lincoln at the casino or to Horseman's Park in Omaha. That's 6303 Q Street to place your bets. You got straight bets, parlays, live in-game bets, props. You can bet on nearly every major sporting event. Go to warhorsecasino.com/sportsbook or download the Warhorse Casino app for all the details and full house rules. Warhorse Sportsbook, no bets, no glory. Coming up next, we've got more Hurrdat Sports Radio here on AM 590 ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities.